Hello? Okay, that works.
Hello.
Perfect, just checking. How's everyone doing? Yeah, we made it to the end of the day, and thank you for being. I always appreciate it when people are sitting in a panel at the end of the day. Like, it requires like a lot of dedication. So thank you so much for being here. We have a really great, exciting panel. I'm really excited about this. And as you may have seen, the title is Bits, Bots, and SBOMs, basically talking about what security is going to be like in 2024. So we're going to talk about, I guess, a lot of things that have been around for a while, SBOMs being one of them. Obviously, it's been 3 years since SBOM was mandated back in the US. How has that conversation changed? What does it actually mean? There has been a lot of maturity in there as well. But before we kick things off, I did want to introduce our lovely panel. So just starting off, right next to me is Stefania Chaplin. So she's a Python developer at heart. She's also currently a solutions architect at GitLab. And she does a lot of work with DevSecOps, security training, software supply chain. And you may have heard her speak at conferences like RSA, Black Hat, and Women in DevOps. We also have Aisha Vlok. She's the head of platform security at Dens2, and she's passionate about cloud security and DevSecOps. And last and definitely not the least, we've got Jessica. She's an IT operations engineer at CyberSafe. Her interest lies in human implications of engineering decisions, and I'm really interested to hear what that means. But she's also the co-organizer for DevOps Day London and DevSecOps London Gathering. So can we just have a loud applause for these women? You know, it's great to have all of them here. So I'm going to kick the conversation off with SBOM. It's been 3 years since SBOM was mandated. How have you guys seen SBOM evolve in the last 3 years, and how is it influencing the security posture for open source projects in 2024?
So I remember working with SBOMs before, when it was actually called Software Bill of Materials. So it was about 2016, and I was working for a open source software security company. And what I saw evolve was, at first, people, this is, almost 10 years ago, people would be like, oh yeah, no, we're not using any open source. No, we don't have any of that. And then the next year it would be like, okay, maybe we are using a bit. And so the way that it's evolved, now people know software, everyone is using open source. It's a big area. There are potential security risks. And it's really important to have this bill of materials. So just like you would have with manufacturing, you have the same with your software. And not just the dependencies you declare, but also all the transitives, so you actually know what's inside. So it's been really a really interesting space to watch, because it was almost 5-10 years ago. It's like, no, this is a really big deal. Like, we need to pay attention. So it's been really good that government and organizations have started to really give it attention that it deserves.
Perfect, thank you.
I think the most exciting part is also package identification is going to become a bit it feels like it's becoming a bit more standardized and taken a bit more seriously. I think someone made the really good point recently where they spoke about how with the advent of SBOM use and its underlying importance, we're seeing this complexity kind of grow and sprawl. And someone made the point they were just kind of like, well, the complexity's kind of always been there. It's just now we can actually see it more accurately. So it seems like there's a lot more in-house standardization of what is going to be the UID of this bit, this open source, package this bit of this dependency that we're going to use, which is interesting.
Perfect.
So yeah, thanks. Pretty exciting. Yeah.
So I have a security background, security operations, and infrastructure security, and cloud security background. So my first introduction to SBOMs was, how do I solve this security problem? It began with that, mainly around what do we have, what are we using, what are the dependencies, what do my images have, and what are the versions and licenses, and and how do I utilize this for, bettering the security posture and perhaps vulnerability management. So that's how I came about with it, and I definitely see a big potential, see the complexities around it, scaling issues, etc. But yeah, it's really exciting that it's getting used more and more.
No, Definitely.
Just to add to Jessica's point about package IDs, so when I was working at this company, how do you identify your open source? Okay, great, jQuery version 3. But because a lot of, especially with the JavaScript universe, people can just add stuff, maybe make a different version. So the company I was working at used cryptographic hashing to identify their components. And they identified there are 72,000 versions of jQuery. Yeah, and this stat was from like 2018, 2019, so I don't even know what it is now, but yeah, not only to have the bill of materials, but to really know which version of what you're using.
That's true, and I think that what you're saying is that it's definitely opened like a can of worms, I feel, as you said, going from the fact that people thought they don't have open source, they don't have all these libraries, to now actually knowing, yep, we've got a lot of things there, but like the maturity that's happening over the organization. And I think that kind of leads quite well into my next couple of questions. That obviously, I think when SBOM started, it started off as a solution to security problems, but it's almost created its own list of, challenges for every organization. I do hear this quite often. People say, I've got SBOMs, all my vendors are providing me with SBOMs. What do I do with them? Like, I don't have the team capacity to even look at these things, or even if I'm looking at them, how do I store them? There's like this whole challenge, but what are some of the opportunities that you see? Like, obviously people are collecting these SBOMs. In organizations that you guys have worked for, or like conversations you're happening, what are some of the opportunities you're seeing that people can utilize in 2024?
Well, I think off the back of your point, that increased visibility. We've always been the cartoon dog sitting in the room and it's been on fire, but now we can kind of see all of it properly. I think there's the exciting part for, I guess, open source projects is as long as you can kind of keep your release versioning. Like your audit trail, like in check, then it opens up the possibility for like bigger organizations to use your software. Because I guess if more organizations are creating like SBOM and like enrichment tools where you can update this static document with kind of what you're using. If you can report on what you use, you can kind of almost make the argument that you can use whatever you want, maybe. You can tell it's a weak argument. It's a weak argument. It needs some work. I don't know.
Yeah, I understand. I think it gives more confidence.
Yeah.
Definitely, because visibility brings that confidence for sure. And it's not just from security point of view, but also like what you're more aware of what we have in place. And if you already have environment systems and your versioning in place that can accommodate the utilization of SBOMs, then you can see the true potential. Otherwise, if it's already chaotic and you introduce the SBOMs, it's just gonna just be more chaotic of visibility. Still visibility for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was working for this company, and they owned Maven Central. So any Java components that you would use, if you were a company and you're like, oh, can we find out what components we're actually using? So we'd run the report based on Maven Central. And something that you'd find is, oh yeah, here are all of the open source components you're using with a critical CVSS 10 vulnerability. So you could, find, the problems you have. But another thing was around versioning. So I've already talked about all the versions of jQuery, but you might find that, okay, for another library, I can't think of any. I want to say Salary, it's a Python library. But anyway, say there are 40 versions. Some organizations might be using 38 versions. So, of course, some of those versions are going to be out of date. And then you can identify, the majority of our team are using this for documentation. Should we maybe do some internal training? Is this an area we want to go? Or, why is everyone using the free open source version when we have a paid for version? So I think in terms of the opportunities and benefits, it's really about visibility, awareness, and then when you have that information, how you can act on it to improve the current status of where you're at.
Yeah, it will hopefully prevent people from spending time solving problems that they don't need to solve, because if we can standardize a set of dependencies that we're using, then we don't need to spend time thinking what should I use for the kind of decisions already made, right? You have a set language and a set you've got your set of dependencies that you can rely on, potentially. Yeah.
I think I like how I can see the clogs ticking for all of you, and you guys make a good point. Knowing what you have has allowed for things like standardization, just knowing where to spend within your teams with training, making sure we're using the right versions of these softwares as well. Now, just flipping them, obviously, it's created a lot of opportunities. And often, reward doesn't come without risk. So what are some of the challenges that you feel like SBOM has created? And I know we kind of like touched on it in question 1, but if we were really to sort of dig deep into that, what are some of the challenges that you guys are seeing, like when SBOM has become a reality for organizations that it's creating?
So I would say when SBOMs are done well, so on the flip, when SBOMs are not done well, if you are having manual processes, if you have someone manually checking, oh, we pulled in this dependency, what are its transitives? It could potentially add bureaucracy, it could add manual processes, and also it depends who's using it. So when I was working at this company, one of my colleagues went to Saudi Arabia, and they had a repository firewall, which means that anything that comes in from the internet, if it has a critical vulnerability, you can say don't let it in. And the person in charge in security had said anything with any vulnerabilities is not allowed in. So obviously there was a really big developer uproar, because how are you going to, if you can't let anything in, you have to balance the actual risk and the policy and the people and the processes, because great, we have automated SBOMs that are telling us we have problems, okay, but what you do next is really can kind of make or break it.
Yeah, I was definitely, there's obviously the at-scale generation of SBOMs that could become really complex. But apart from that, it is what you utilize it for. It's another means, that it's another piece of information that is more standardized and tidied up to give you more information on how you would like to take that next step forward. Good luck to whoever is trying to say, like, we'll block if there is any vulnerability at all. You still have to worry about all the challenges and problems that come with vulnerability and risk management, because you got to make sure that there is that context around in order to identify whether that vulnerability is even exploitable and risk to your environment in the first place. And that challenge is not just solved because there's all of a sudden this neat generation of SBOMs that are automated in a nice way. So there is some data and human analysis that will go in, and still carry on with awareness of the engineers and developers. So it's with anything that is shiny and new and amazing, especially with SBOMs, it can lead people into thinking, especially in security, that you can solve a whole lot of problems, but there's still the processes and operationalization part that comes after what you do with it. There are amazing tools which we can talk about in a little bit about utilization of SBOMs, but yeah, there is still that risk work and the context work.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of going from like maintaining absolutely nothing to like building cool like proof of concepts and just like writing a blog and just like leaving it to being in the operations team. Like it puts strain on your org chart, because you're like, oh, if it's not the consequences of the information I've found. I definitely wanted to just underscore that point. It just puts real strain on the org, because what are you going to do now that you found all this? And that's provided that the information that you found is accurate, because you've got the garbage in, garbage out problem. And then on top of that, the SBOM itself is static. So it's like...
Yeah, it's a point in time.
Yeah, what are you going to do? Like generate another... Yeah. I'm sure there's someone in this room who has far more.
No. And I think that's actually a it's a perfect segue. Actually, like with panels, like I know normally we save questions for last, but I think panels are usually much more, engaging if people do start throwing in questions. So I do obviously have my premeditated questions, but I'd be happy to throw some audience questions in between if people already are, the conversations are already triggering some great questions. Does anyone have one? I'd be happy to throw that to the panel. Yes? Give you that.
Thanks. So there's been some amazing talks today, and I keep hearing that SBOMs are wonderful and they're ubiquitous. What I'm hearing from some customers are, yeah, I've heard about them, they're aspirational. Or the other thing is, okay, I have all these SBOMs, what the hell do I do with all this information? You referenced this, but I would love to get into that, because all day, nobody's gotten to that point. They just are celebrating that we have an SBOM. And do you even know if it's accurate? There are so many issues to discuss, and I feel like it's really important to surface that it exists doesn't help.
Okay.
Thank you. That's a good question, and I think that is pretty much the crux of, I guess, the whole SBOM conversation is that, yes, people are creating it, they're supplying them to people, everyone has all these SBOMs, but really, like, what's being done with it? And I know you guys kind of touched on it, but I think it'll be nice to sort of dig deeper into, like, what are some of the things that people are maybe doing that's working really well, or, again, that opportunity question, maybe we can dig a bit deeper into that.
Yeah, so if you think about, I suppose we're all so well knowledged, we haven't even said what an SBOM is. So what is an SBOM? Software bill of materials. So yeah, what are you doing with that information? And we talk about security. Whose responsibility is security? And devs point at security point at devs. Security is a shared responsibility. So if you take that approach to SBOMs, okay, great, we know what dependencies are within our project. Okay, so now what do we do? Okay, well, who's introducing them? Okay, so the developers are introducing them. Maybe we can empower them, give them information within their IDEs so that they can know what dependencies they're using and if there are security risks. Because if you shift left with security, then it costs, it's a lot cheaper to fix, less context switching. So in terms of with the SBOM, I think it's about having it in the right places. So as a developer introduces a vulnerability, that's probably the best place for them to know they're introducing it and then to fix it. So that's kind of at the very granular level for each dependency. Then what you end up with from a probably more operational perspective is you're like, okay, now I have all of these reports for all these people, and in the ideal world, okay, let's empower each developer to fix each dependency so they're going to be clean. That's going to be the idealistic world I live. But then for the more report side, I'm just going to pass over to my esteemed panelists who can get that perspective.
I think you made a really valid point that we are one of the reasons why I love conferences is we get to the ability to be able to talk about the way that we want to do things. Mm-hmm. And the way that we wish things were done, and we get to kind of operate in that sort of world of best practice. But when it comes down to it, the incentive structure really isn't. The issue with SBOMs is, I feel like a lot of the time, it exacerbates the opposition between dev and security. And there are some really cool tools like, is it like JIT, that you can like gamify the sort of like the ownership of like correcting any like fixing exploitable vulnerabilities. Sorry, I've run out of words. I've got to the end of the day and I have like 20 left, so I'm going to try to use them well. I think there are some interesting projects that are working to change the incentive structure, but without a solid, without like a solid program that works to support devs in owning the vulnerabilities that they're introducing into the business. That's something that you've had experience with, right? Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if we look at like real life examples and utilization of it, so let's start with the dev and the preventative side of utilization of SBOMs. So you're empowering dev, you're giving them information that and the context, and they're aware of the environments that they can feel empowered to be able to make that decision. Yes, there's this vulnerability, the context is there, and I'm not too worried about it, it's not exploitable. And then they have that empowerment to be able to allow certain CVs that are introduced. The way you can approach this is how much the organization needs security and how strict they'd like to be. Okay, so where I have been, we provide that as informational. So you start from the pipeline itself. You already give that information. SBOM is amazing for that. And the other aspect is, for example, I have worked with vulnerability scanners, and vulnerability scanners traditionally have operators and engines that pull images and downloads and scans, creates the list of CVs and then report outputs. Right? So with SBOM you can do more like indexing, less heavy processing. On vulnerability output side as well, so that's another really good real life use case. Another aspect is, if you're familiar with security operations, is let's say there is a 0-day, a vulnerability that's on fire, and you would like to know if it exists in your environment. And that's what, again, you can utilize that information for. These are some of the examples. But when it comes to making it work for you, really depends on what you already have, the dev culture you have in place, what you'd like to achieve with security, and how much risk you would like to accept or not accept, and how you would operationalize it in terms of, what you'd like to do with the information that SBOMs provide.
Perfect. No, I love how you've summarized it at the end, because at the end of the day, because it's such a big piece of work, and it almost is something that probably might mean something very different for organizations based on, as you said, how you're wanting to use it, what your risk threshold is, what operations and processes you've got in place. So that's really nicely summarized. Are there any other questions in the audience that everyone has at the top of their head that they really want to throw out? Yep.
Hi, wonderful panel. Ignore Alan back there. I'm going to say some things.
Most people do.
I'm joking. I'll make a provocative statement. I'll say poorly constructed or maintained SBOMs are a sign of a dirty house behind the scenes rather than the inverse, right? Like if you're not taking care of your dependencies properly, it's going to look a bit ugly. On the other hand, the security guy in me says, if you're doing things like pulling deps off the internet at build time, you might be doing it wrong. So the provocative question is, best of the best. What have you seen? What should we be targeting rather than trying to use maybe an imperfect hybrid system today? If you were to fast forward 5 years in the future, what does good look like, and how do we not only use SBOMs effectively, but build software well 5 years from now?
Thank you. I actually love that question. Going into the future, that's exactly what the panel is about. So if I'm reading this idea talking about what does really good or aspirational look like? Yeah, what's the best case scenario?
Yeah, so perfect scenario. So you're not downloading stuff off the internet. You have a proper repository. So everything that you want to download comes and is cached internally, because this can also save the day. If you haven't heard of NPM LeftPad, which was when a developer declared war with NPM and was like, I'm taking my libraries off, and literally thousands of build fails, including some of the big organizations like Google, Facebook, etc. So you want to have your dependencies stored locally, so to prevent that, and also so you can run security tests. When your dependencies are coming in, you're also going to have policies checking, are there vulnerabilities? What is the license obligation? Because this is also, we kind of touched on context a bit, but we haven't really spoken about software licenses, because some of them are like, yeah, great, use it, change it, distribute it, do whatever you want, that's cool. And then other ones are like, you touch it, you bought it. So there's a lot of financial obligations. And I think a lot of times we talk about the security, but we don't really talk about the licensing as much. So you have your dependencies coming in, they're being checked, they're being approved. Then when your developers, because 0 days come in, just because something was downloaded yesterday doesn't mean it's going to be safe today. So there would be checks within the IDE, at build phase, if you have a release that's about to go into production, and then also continual scanning, maybe on a 24 basis. Just on your SBOM, you can just be like, any new vulnerabilities today for anything I'm using? So I haven't even answered your question, because this is just best practice today. I haven't really given anything revolutionary. But I think what we're missing today is kind of that awareness. Like people are like, yeah, SBOMs are aspirational. Yeah, we want it. So I would hope in 5 years people are more, they know, they're more, I can't remember the word, not aware. They're more in control, ownership. They're more, they own their dependencies. They know what they're using. SBOM isn't a bad word. It's just, just standard. So that's where I would hope we could get to.
Yeah, I don't know why I accidentally pushed a button. I thought I'd broken it. Hopefully, yeah, a more dynamic version of that static bill would be useful. Changing in some sort of way of being able to interact with the SBOM so that it would change the incentive structure so that it would be a bit more of a shared responsibility. Where I know that's kind of getting at the kind of persistent problem that we have in security versus dev and security engineering in general, but it would be really useful for the way that we interact with SBOMs to for us to kind of get a bit more perceived value from them other than requirement to operate in a certain industry or within a certain territory, because I think at the moment that top-down initiative is a really, is an encouraging sign. It's promising, but at the same time, it will still feel a little bit like, I think once we've kind of gotten past the ability to properly classify each package version and where everything sits, making sure that the static document that we have is as living as possible and as interactive as possible and can support the policy structure that we have, then that might be useful. What do you think?
I think it's very difficult to say this is the target state. Really depends on the organization, how much security you'd like to do, how little you would like to impact the dev process as well. Because at the end of the day, it's the balance of not being able to, not slowing things down, but also making the checks are in place. So yes, all the best practices. If I was to say, if I was to explain, give you a picture of what the perfect looks like, it might take us a century back in dev, because that would be just putting security in the forefront and just making sure everything is checked and verified. There is, all the best practices in place, and all the vulnerabilities don't exist at all, and then the images are signed, and only the signed images get pushed, and then there's further checks in runtime, and then it's really difficult to build this perfect picture, but it's a struggle to sort of get there. Yes, verification. Admission control sort of application where you can have orchestration, depending on, again, how security is considered within the organization. And then having all the layers. So you have from IDE all the way to something is running in prod, and we have threat detection in place to see if there is any malicious behavior happening. You would like to be able to cover, and it's not the easiest. So for example, with vulnerability scanners, a lot of the time, if you have Helm charts, and the Helm charts do a call out, and they pull images, and then you find them later on, not all tools will cover everything. So in your engineering, you've got to know your blind spots, and then have those layers added on top.
Thank you for that. No, I think that was really interesting. And it's funny because I think leading on to what you had said, I had a question here about how do we integrate SBOMs into DevSecOps without impacting the development. And it's almost like if we do have ideal state security, we almost have to make that assumption that everything we do in security is not going to impact the devs, and somehow it's not going to slow them down. And I don't know if there's a perfect scenario where we can balance the both. So we always have to probably make compromises on a little bit on one side or the other.
Instead of buzzword, can you define DevSecOps?
Okay. Maybe I'll throw that to the panel. I'll be happy to. I mean, my understanding of, and I'll be happy for you guys to share it, obviously, with and thank you for catching that, because I think as a security community, we love our buzzwords and we just assume everyone just knows what they mean. But it's just about having security in there from the beginning, making it part of the process. People use CI/CD pipeline or shifting left, or however you want to say it. But I've always seen it as something that you just have it baked in, and it's just something you think about from the beginning to the end, and it's not an afterthought. And that's where my question was coming from, is that how can we make SBOMs part of that? Because at the moment it is very much an afterthought, because it's only come into place 3 years ago, where people have obviously built softwares for years. But yeah, I guess maybe it is worthwhile sort of dissecting this, how can we put SBOMs into DevSecOps without impacting what our developers are doing and the speed of actually producing software as well.
I can answer a bit of all of the questions about. It's what is DevSecOps? It's a lifestyle. Yeah.
That's a t-shirt
That's a t-shirt. I was thinking, I literally have a slide, what is DevSecOps? I'm trying to remember the words on it. But what it really is, as the name suggests, developer security operations, and it's actually really, it's about culture. It's about the shared responsibility of security across the software development lifecycle. So it's not a case of, you're a security, it's all you, or your developer operations. It's getting away from this kind of finger pointing, getting away from the silos, and it's kind of learning on the lessons, going from waterfall to agile/fragile to DevOps to DevSecOps, and then you have all of the other acronyms that are coming along when there's like MLOps and then SecMLOps, and it's loads of buzzwords out there. So when you have the SBOMs, it really comes down to how do you integrate that into the existing workflow. So kind of a bit to what I said earlier, empowering developers with the security information, and also so that they know what the problem is it relevant to them, and also how to fix it. So thankfully with open source, most of the time the solution is just to upgrade. So this is quite different from with SaaS, where you write your own code, you write it, you need to fix it. Usually with open source, it ends up, you're using a bad version. So in terms of, it's not just SBOMs. How do we integrate security into the existing workflows? So having it as part of the process, so having the information within whether it's the developer or within the operation workflow, in language that they can understand. Because I don't know if anyone's ever read, now let's do a little show of hands. Who's ever read a CVE before or been in the National Vulnerability Database? Oh, cool. Okay, so most people, that looks good. So what you'll know is it's not really written as a DIY for hackers. It's more, okay, this is your problem, and it's all very terse. And so as a developer, if you're not a security guru, then you won't necessarily know what that means. So having the results in a absorbable format, that will make a long way for having it within the DevSecOps workflow.
Yeah, definitely. I think absorbing as part of that cognitive load is going to be intrinsic, because I feel like SBOMs seem to be easier to work with if you still work in a waterfall format. Like if you're still working in, if you're truly agile, it doesn't really feel like it can fit into that classic SDLC workflow that you see popularized as this is what DevOps or DevSecOps looks like, as in the kind of continuous improvement flow. I think we've got to abstract a little bit of that, as much of that cognitive load as possible, to be able to make something easily triaged and easily fixable. You need the remediation to be kind of okay, what do I need to do? It's my problem. Let me solve it. The actual empowerment, instead of just saying, "Oh, I'm going to empower you," empowering people, and then also just giving them the information that they need in a digestible format. Because I think most developers will do the right, they will. A lot of developers don't know that. A lot of the time we ship horrible code that is not secure because you don't know how to secure it better. And I think having that information in a lot more of an easily accessible format would go a long way. I don't know what you both think. That's just something I should have kept on my blog.
I have an anecdote.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was in a panel earlier, and I told the story of, I joined, it was a small startup, and on my first day, the other person, the senior, was like, so I quit, so we're going to have a month of handover, and it was my first ever development job. I was like, oh, wow. The next company I work in is the one for the software security SBOM. And then I find out about software vulnerabilities and about licenses. And I literally call my old CTO. There was only 20 people in the company, but I'm like, I'm really sorry. I just did what Stack Overflow told me. I didn't know about licenses or I just went for the latest. And it's like you said, developers will usually do the right thing if they know what they need to do, but there's a little gap, which personal experience, that may have fallen into.
It definitely starts with culture. So how do your developers approach security? Do they consider it being part of what they're doing, and is their responsibility as well to look out for? Or have they always seen it as something added, extra, put on top? So if you're on the security side, consider if you're feeding that sort of culture by adding external tools that will output stuff and send to them and say, hey, here's a list of all the CVEs you might have somewhere. Well, I can't tell you where because the output doesn't say where. But you need to go and find and fix them. And they don't even have the context. And some of the time, those sort of decisions will need to be made with security operations. So we're talking about collaboration a lot and integration. So you're looking at toolage-wise, there's always amazing stuff out there you can integrate into your pipelines and make that information available. But without this culture, the information will just sit in the PRs or in the issues and just pile up, and no one will do anything about them, or you won't even have any way of verifying anything has been done on them, or checking that it's been done, or retro scanning, etc. So it definitely starts with culture. So what are you going to integrate? First, integrate security culture into your dev mentality, and then consider the controls that you will integrate into the pipelines, and starting from IDE.
And just on that, on culture, one of the, which book is it? I think it's Accelerate, and they talk about culture and the kind of the three different types. So pathological, which is kind of very, I'm going to say tyrannical, top-down approach. Bureaucratic, so lots of bureaucracy, or generative, which is the one you ideally want. And when it comes to failure, so when there is a vulnerability, oh no, there's a vulnerability in production, there's a failure in the system. What happens when there's a failure? Is it a case of heads roll, fingers are pointed, like everyone's like, I don't ever want to report my failures because I might get fired? Or is it seen that failures are an opportunity to improve the system? So it's like, okay, well, now we know, okay, let's fix it. How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? How can we improve the system, which kind of comes into the whole, SRE area. So definitely with culture, you need to, have a safe space, psychological safety, so that you can, remediate, move on, rather than finger pointing.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think sometimes people see sometimes having a generative culture, it feels like such a big thing. It feels like such a massive unattainable word. And sometimes just changing the incentive structure in a business can do so much. Like maybe instead of a hack day or a game day, it could be that there could be the game day could be around addressing a list of vulnerabilities in your code base, and then there could be a game of them, a metric. There could be a winner. There could be. Sometimes I think when the stakes are so high, it can feel like you don't want to belittle it with any sort of game, but we need to make things a little bit more approachable, because otherwise the culture, if we don't impact the culture, it doesn't change, right? I mean, I know it sounds really silly to just say involve games, but yeah.
Make it fun. Security should be fun, right? But I'm hearing a lot of culture, obviously, and not making assumptions. To your point, we make insecurity assumptions about everyone knows what these acronyms means. We make assumption that everyone's seen an CVE and they know exactly what to do with it. So those are some really good points. We are coming to the tail end of the panel. Are there any other questions that the audience have? I've got a question about AI, and I was thinking I want to go through one panel or talk in 2024 without mentioning AI, so I'd be quite happy to skip this if anyone in the audience actually has a good question, and I've got one hand over there. I'll come up to you.
Hello. So on the question about what is DevSecOps, I once worked for a cult called Pivotal Software, if anybody has heard of that company. And we had this concept of balanced teams, and the way that I've always looked at DevSecOps is that it isn't actually about, I wouldn't use the word culture and I wouldn't necessarily even use the word workflow, but it's about the concept of you cannot have a balanced team without a security person and an operations person in your dev team. Does that mesh with anything that you've seen, or am I just imagining this from my days of wearing a Pivotal hoodie?
Thank you for that. I think you guys can start answering while I make my way back.
I think with your example, it really depends as well on the size of your teams. So you can have the whole pizza example. But the reason I say this, back when I was very heavily involved in this area, and we would talk to people, and in general, for every 100 developers, you would have maybe 10 or 20 ops, and you would have about 1 security. And I would go around to different organizations, different sizes, countries, vectors. I'm like, oh, cool, how many devs do you have? Oh, how many security do you have? And sometimes that can be 1 to 300. Sometimes when it's 1 to 50, I'm like, wow, you're doing great. So in terms of with that structure, well, it depends on, how the organization, because that sounds awesome, and I wish it was that way every time, but the reality is that doesn't always happen, which is why Security Champions are a really good program, because you empower the developers that are passionate about security, become paranoid about security, become, okay, everyone, we need to fix this. So, you can, when you have those types of ratios, you can, be pushed and pulled a bit in different directions. But yeah, it just really depends on the team and organizational structure. Because I would love for that to happen, but I haven't seen it that often.
Yeah, it's so hard to justify, like, that headcount. Because as soon as you start to, narrow your product focus, the whole idea is, okay, well, we have fewer features and therefore we need fewer people to support this development because we're developing on a narrower scope. It's so tricky because I think when we talk about Pivotal, they're so far ahead in the sort of adoption scale that I remember someone saying we should almost treat this each security operations person is like a consultant that will eventually kind of go put themselves out of business if we work to that model. And that sounds ideal, but it doesn't sound realistic, particularly today, because there's a lot of layoffs happening, if you noticed. And a lot of, as a result, a lot of developers find themselves having to beat that. They're like, cool, I am also now the ops person and the security. And then their scope gets narrowed. They don't really, there's too much to triage. It can just be a bit stressful, but that would be an incredible model if it could be supported. Have you seen anything like that? Like a squad with a dedicated ops or a dedicated security team to be able to...
Yes, so when I was a security engineer, I was integrated into the SRE team, and right now I'm heading a security engineering team who are unofficially integrated into the DevOps teams. So yes, if you have the headcounts and you have the skills, it's the ideal state to have a DevOps function, whichever the company wants to call it, SRE, DevOps, and platform engineering, whatever they would like to call it. It's amazing to have dedicated security engineers. However, let's not forget DevOps. A lot of DevOps practices and capabilities that they put in place are also security capabilities as well. Like if you look at, they are responsible with secret management. So whether there is a security engineer dedicated for it or not, they are responsible with a lot of security tools that have security implications or outright security capabilities to build into the platform. So depending on the organization, size of the organization, the ideal is to have someone with a security hat embedded in, or it's a mentality thing, right? So I have in the past worked with dev and DevOps engineers who were more security minded than me as a security professional, who were a lot more risk averse than I was. So it's a bit of a mentality thing where you find you can utilize and sort of encourage that within the teams that you already have. So to say, it depends. It really depends on the existing culture, existing org structure, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I know this is one of those conversations that's going to be never ending. I don't think we can close this off, but I'm mindful of everyone's time in the next talk. So thank you so much. I think you guys have added a lot of really great points, some really nice t-shirt slogans there, like SBOM is not a bad word. I did like that one. So if someone went into printing t-shirts, there you go. You've got a couple over there. But thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us this late in the afternoon and being energetic and great questions. Thanks a lot.